Welcome to Consumer Connection. My name is Susan Jones, Branch Manager with Fairfax County Consumer Affairs. I have with me today Debora Brown and Jordonna Hailey, Senior Environmental Health Specialists with the Fairfax County Health Department Consumer Protection Program. And of course, we have our own Carl Newcomb, Branch Manager with Fairfax County Regulation and Licensing Branch. Welcome, everyone. Hope you all had a great 4th of July. Summer is a-blazing, which means fairs, carnivals, and festivals. So you know what that entails: fun, sun, and food on a stick. As a consumer, you might frequent these family-friendly festivals. So what do you need to know as it relates to food safety at these temporary food events? Debora and Jordonna are here to explain the amusement behind the food safety when it comes to temporary food events. Carl will explain the licensing requirements behind temporary food events. Today's topic is about temporary food events and general food safety. So both of you have worked for the Health Department, Division of Environmental Health. Can you share what the Division of Environmental Health actually does?
Yes, ma'am. So the Division of Environmental Health has multiple functions to protect and improve public health by preventing, minimizing, and eliminating exposure to biological, chemical, or physical hazards through a variety of regulatory activities, including permitting and inspecting businesses and public facilities. Environmental health also investigates reports of public health and safety menaces, and that can be anywhere in the community.
So what are the different functions in environmental health?
Environmental health has multiple functions: permits and inspections, on-site sewage and water, pests, pools, permitted facilities, environmental protection, disease-carrying insects, food safety, and more specifically, temporary food events, which we will ride out today.
So what services does the Health Department provide regarding temporary food events?
Well, our program plays two major roles when it comes to temporary food events. As a coordinator, we permit the actual event, but we also permit and conduct the food safety inspections for the temporary food establishments, or what we call vendors. For example, an event can be Celebrate Fairfax, while a food vendor can be Suja Samosas.
So why do we call it a temporary food event and not just a regular food establishment permit?
So the word temporary in temporary food event refers to the specified time period of no more than 14 consecutive days. For a temporary food event to be permitted, it cannot last for more than 14 days consecutively, but there are some exceptions, one being a farmer's market, whereas a food establishment operates and is permitted for the year. When a temporary food event is permitted, it is only permitted for that specific event during that specified time period.
So what does that mean? Your program inspects every temporary food event in Fairfax County?
Well, that is a good question. Not exactly. Fairfax County has many events throughout the year, but the Consumer Protection Program specifically permits and inspects the events that are deemed public, not private, and those that are permitted through Fairfax County Zoning Department if there is a food component involved. When we specify public, we are referring to events that are open to the public, advertised to the public, and may even require public ticket sales.
So what about food trucks? Are they allowed to attend these events?
Yes, ma'am, they are included as well. The parameters are different for the application process. For licensed Fairfax County mobile food trucks, they are not required to apply for a temporary food establishment permit, but are subject to receive a routine inspection on site during the event. As for permitted mobile food trucks that are outside of our jurisdiction, they are required to apply for a temporary food establishment permit as long as they have provided the proper documentation during the application process. They are subject to pay the temporary food event fee unless they can provide proof that they have paid for a temporary food event during the current year, anywhere in the state of Virginia.
So being a temporary food event inspector sounds interesting. What exactly do they do, and how is it different from your regular food safety inspections?
Our regulatory food safety inspections for permitted food establishments focus on the requirements specified by the FDA Food Code to include supervision, employee health policy, good hygienic practices, contamination prevention, and various other risk factor violations that contribute to foodborne illness. As for a temporary food establishment inspection, The requirements are less expansive, but still focus on the major risk factor violations that could potentially cause foodborne illness, such as good hygienic practices, time and temperature control, contamination prevention, food source, and more.
Now, since these events often occur outside, are there added concerns that you should identify for food safety practices?
Oh, yes, ma'am, there are. One of the most things that is noticeable with temporary food events is the presence of a tent or covering for environmental protection from contamination. The booths need to be placed over proper ground cover. Some examples are asphalt or concrete. They need to have containers with tight-fitting lids, and food service items need to be elevated above the ground. Due to potential high temperatures or inclement weather, there should be adequate equipment for storage to maintain proper cold holding and hot holding of hazardous food items.
Sounds like a good idea. Do temporary food events require fees?
Yes, ma'am. Fees are assessed only for the food vendors, not for the temporary food event itself, at least for our specific program. The fee is a one-time $40 fee that is valid for the state of Virginia for the entire calendar year. This means if Suja Samosas applied to participate at an event in another jurisdiction within Virginia in March of 2024, that fee is valid for the event in May of 2024. During the application process, the food vendor would upload their proof of payment as a document.
Do you all have to work with other agencies to permit temporary food events?
Great question. Yes, we do. We must collaborate with multiple agencies on different aspects for temporary food events. For example, special permits are needed for some temporary food events. Therefore, the applicant would contact the zoning division to obtain required permits, approval, and fees would be assessed. For mobile food units, in addition to having a valid health department permit for the truck, the Department of Cable and Consumer Services requires the trucks to have solicitor's licenses.
Well, this would be a good time to introduce Carl Newcomb, Branch Manager of Regulation and Licensing. So, what services does the Regulation and Licensing Branch provide?
Regulation and Licensing Branch is responsible for issuing licenses, permits, registrations, and regulating charitable organizations, going out of business sales, massage establishments, massage therapists, pawnbrokers, precious metal and gem dealers, shared mobility devices, which are your electric scooters, trespass tow operators, and of course canvassers, promoters, solicitors, more commonly referred to as solicitors. Our office also inspects taxi cabs for both safety issues and meter accuracy, and engages in outreach and education related to the businesses it regulates, and investigates consumer complaints in the business areas we regulate.
So, Carl, you mentioned canvassers, promoters, and solicitors. How does this relate to the process for food trucks to attain a license?
There's a three-step process for food trucks and or temporary food stands to operate legally in Fairfax County. The first step is a stop at the health department for the necessary permits, and if it's a food truck, a required an inspection of the truck, which is the most important step. The next step is where the food truck or temp food stand is located, and that usually requires a permitting from the zoning department. It might be on public or private property, but usually requires a permit. Finally, my office, Regulation and Licensing, issues the licenses, in this case a solicitor's license, to individuals working on the food truck or at the temporary food stand. We run background checks on those individuals and make sure they have completed the first two steps, which is health department and zoning. The bottom line is, whether it's at a food truck or a temporary food stand, or more commonly our solicitors go door to door in neighborhoods, if they don't have the required solicitor's license, it's a violation of law, and they can be charged with a Class 2 misdemeanor.
Well, it's definitely something that everybody needs to do. Thank you, Carl, for explaining the Regulation and Licensing Branch involvement in temporary food events. So let's turn back to Debora and Jordonna. So temporary events are often seen in the summertime, but is there a specific season for these events?
Yes, you are correct. So temporary food events are heavily concentrated during the spring and summer months, but we do permit these events in the fall and winter as well. One type of event that we often see throughout the year is seasonal farmers markets, depending on the type of food that they sell.
Now, if someone is interested in applying for a temporary food event, how do they go about the application process?
Well, there are actually two types of applications, one for the actual event, which should be submitted by the event coordinator and provide a map of the event and proposed food vendors, and one for the food vendor so they can obtain a temporary food establishment permit. Both applications can be submitted through our customer portal called PLUS, or Planning and Land Use System.
Now, is there any guidance for the application process?
Yes, ma'am, there is. Now, applicants can find a temporary food event training for vendors on YouTube, which provides information on online guidance for the application process. Temporary event training for vendors 2023, and that's at youtube.com.
So what if a food vendor only wants to sample their product? Is there a temporary food establishment permit required?
Awesome question. Sampling food items at a temporary food event is acceptable if the items are prepackaged, non-TCS, meaning the food will not grow bacteria, a maximum of only 6 samples are sampled at a time, and all the sanitation requirements are being followed. For example, if a food vendor wants to sample their dip, they would provide a temporary hand washing setup, gloves or utensils to portion out the samples, maintain required cold food temperatures for the dips, a food thermometer, and all disposable items. A sample cannot be a whole meal or a hot held food item. Customers can follow the sampling guidelines provided on our website.
So you mentioned mobile food units, but what about permitted restaurants? Can they attempt temporary food events as food vendors?
Yes, ma'am, they actually can. Actually, these are some of the easier applications to process. Fairfax County permitted food establishments already hold an active food establishment permit. They're familiar with our regulatory processing and do not need to be assessed the $40 fee.
So how can the public reach out to the Division of Environmental Health?
Our main phone number is 703-246-2201, and our website is fairfaxcounty.gov/health/food. We are open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 p.m.
So how can the public reach out to Regulation and Licensing Branch?
We're at 703-324-5966, or you can also check at our website on the screen, excuse me.
So, Debora and Jordonna, thank you so much for joining us today to share such valuable information about temporary food events and the services provided by the Health Department Consumer Protection Program. Carl, thank you for providing additional information on the Regulation and Licensing Branch and your part in licensing food trucks. Now, if you have a consumer issue, you can contact us at 703-222-8435. You can like us on Facebook at Fairfax County Consumer Affairs or visit our website at www.fairfaxcounty.gov/cableconsumer. Now join us next month for Consumer Connection. Enjoy your summer.